Part 1. The Unassuming Recruit. A morning mist clung to the training grounds of the Royal Guard Academy like a shroud of doubt, sharing the ancient oak trees that had witnessed countless recruits attempt to prove their worth over the decades. 22-year-old Marcus Chen stepped off the transport bus with a worn duffel bag slung over his shoulder, his slight frame dwarfed by the imposing, Gothic architecture that served as headquarters for the most elite military unit in the kingdom. At 5 feet 7 inches and weighing barely 140 pounds, Marcus looked more like a university librarian than a potential member of an organization. His members were legendarily required to meet the highest standards of physical prowess, tactical intelligence, and unwavering courage. His wire-rimmed glasses caught the pale morning light as he studied the ornate iron gates that separated the academy from the outside world, behind which lay either his future or his most spectacular failure. The other recruits who had arrived on the same transport were already forming the kind of natural hierarchies that emerged when young men sized each other up in competitive environments. Marcus observed their interactions with the careful attention he had learned to pay to social dynamics, noting how physical presence, confident speech patterns, and immediate displays of capability created instant impressions that would be difficult to overcome. James Bradford commanded attention simply by existing in any space. His 6'4" frame and natural athleticism marking him as the kind of recruit the Royal Guard traditionally sought. He moved with the fluid confidence of someone who had excelled at every physical challenge throughout his life, and his booming voice carried the authority of natural leadership. Other recruits gravitated toward him instinctively, recognizing the qualities that typically predicted success in military environments. William Torres had arrived with an impressive resume of martial arts achievements, his muscular build and precise movements advertising years of disciplined training in multiple fighting disciplines. He spoke knowledgeably about advanced combat techniques, weapon systems, and tactical strategies that most recruits learned only after months of intensive instruction. His credentials suggested he would excel in every aspect of Royal Guard training. David Park's background in competitive athletics was evident in his explosive speed and endurance capabilities that had already become apparent during their brief walk from the transport to the registration building. He moved with the kind of economical grace that characterized elite athletes, and his quiet confidence suggested someone accustomed to performing under pressure and exceeding expectations consistently. Marcus listened to their conversations about previous military experience, athletic accomplishments, and family traditions of service, while maintaining the careful invisibility that had served him well throughout his life. He offered no boastful stories about past achievements, made no claims about hidden capabilities, and showed no signs of the aggressive competitiveness that characterized most of his fellow recruits. What Marcus didn't share was the unconventional path that had brought him to this moment. While his fellow recruits had followed traditional routes through military academies, athletic programs, and family expectations, Marcus had spent the previous 4 years studying ancient martial arts under a master who valued spiritual development and philosophical understanding above physical dominance and competitive victory. Master Liu had taught Marcus that true martial arts mastery was not about defeating opponents or displaying superior strength, but about understanding the fundamental principles of movement, balance, and energy that governed all physical interactions. The training had been intensely demanding in ways that had nothing to do with building impressive muscle mass or developing flashy fighting techniques that would impress observers. Instead, Marcus had learned to move with efficiency that seemed effortless, to read an opponent's intentions through subtle changes in posture and breathing, and to redirect aggressive energy rather than meeting it with opposing force. His training emphasized speed of thought over speed of movement, tactical intelligence over physical intimidation, and adaptability over rigid adherence to prescribed techniques. The philosophical foundations of his training had taught Marcus to value precision over power, timing over strength, and understanding over dominance. He had learned to see combat as a form of problem-solving that required creativity, patience, and deep respect for the principles that governed effective movement and strategic thinking. This approach was fundamentally different from the aggressive, competitiveness that characterized most martial arts training. Marcus had also spent countless hours studying the psychology of conflict, learning to recognize the mental and emotional patterns that preceded physical confrontation. Master Liu had taught him that true victory often came from avoiding unnecessary fights rather than winning them, but also that when conflict became unavoidable, decisive action taken at precisely the right moment could end dangerous situations. Before they escalated to cause serious harm, the training had been conducted in near complete isolation from the traditional martial arts community, partly because Master Liu's methods were often misunderstood by practitioners who focused primarily on tournament competition and public demonstrations of skill. Marcus had learned to keep his capabilities private, understanding that his unconventional training might be dismissed or underestimated by those who equated martial arts mastery with visible displays of physical dominance. This background had taught Marcus to observe carefully before acting, to understand situations thoroughly before making commitments, and to reserve judgment about others until their true capabilities became apparent through action rather than words. He applied these principles to his assessment of his fellow recruits, recognizing qualities that went beyond physical appearance and confident speech patterns. As the recruits gathered for their first briefing in the academy's imposing main hall, Marcus noted the subtle hierarchies that were already forming based on first impressions and preliminary conversations. He observed how natural leaders like Bradford were being deferred to by others, how accomplished fighters like Torres were being viewed with respect and slight intimidation, and how elite athletes like Park were assumed to possess advantages that would serve them well throughout the training process. Marcus also noticed that none of his fellow recruits were paying particular attention to him, which suited his temperament perfectly and allowed him to observe without being observed. In return, he had learned long ago that being underestimated could be a significant tactical advantage, providing opportunities for surprise that wouldn't be available to those who immediately commanded attention and respect. The Academy's commanding officer, Colonel Sarah Hartwell, entered the hall with the kind of presence that immediately commanded absolute attention and silence from every recruit present. Her 25 years of distinguished service were evident in her bearing, and her reputation for excellence and fairness had made her a legendary figure within Royal Guard circles. She studied the assembled recruits with eyes that seemed to see beyond surface appearances to evaluate potential that might not be immediately obvious. Colonel Hartwell's opening address was legendary among Royal Guard recruits, a speech that had been refined through years of experience and carefully crafted to separate those who possessed genuine commitment from those who were merely attracted to the prestige and status associated with elite military service. She spoke about the extraordinary demands they would face, the mental and physical challenges that would test every aspect of their character and capability. She explained that Royal Guard training was designed to identify not just physical excellence, but also moral courage, tactical intelligence, and the kind of unshakable integrity that would allow them to serve with honor under any circumstances they might encounter. She warned them that many would discover during the training process that they lacked the comprehensive capabilities required for service, and that recognizing one's limitations early was itself a form of courage and wisdom. As Marcus listened to Colonel Hartwell's words, he felt a deep resonance with the values she described and the standards she outlined. The training she promised would test exactly the qualities that Master Liu had spent for years, helping him develop mental clarity under pressure, physical capability that transcended mere strength, and the moral foundation necessary to use power responsibly and effectively. But Marcus also understood that his unconventional background would make his journey through Royal Guard training fundamentally different from that of his fellow recruits. While they would be building upon foundations of traditional military training, competitive athletics, and proven fighting techniques, he would need to translate philosophical understanding and spiritual discipline into practical applications that satisfied rigorous military standards. The challenge excited rather than intimidated him, representing the kind of comprehensive test that would reveal whether Master Liu's unconventional methods had truly prepared him for real-world applications of martial arts mastery. Ready to discover whether for years of intensive but private training had given him capabilities that could compete with the traditional preparation that characterized his fellow recruits. As the briefing concluded and the recruits were dismissed to their dormitory assignments, Marcus gathered his simple belongings and prepared to begin a process that would either validate everything he had learned or expose the limitations of his unconventional preparation. Either outcome would teach him something valuable about himself and his chosen path. Walking across the academy courtyard toward his assigned quarters, Marcus felt the same calm determination that had sustained him through 4 years of demanding training under Master Lu's guidance. He was ready to face whatever challenges awaited him, confident in his preparation, but humble about the journey that lay ahead. The real test was about to begin, and Marcus was prepared to let his actions speak louder than any words ever could. Part 2. First impressions. The dormitory assignment placed Marcus in a room with 3 other recruits whose contrasting personalities and backgrounds created an immediate microcosm of the social dynamics that would define their shared experience over the coming months. The Spartan accommodations were designed to eliminate distractions and foster the kind of focused dedication that Royal Guard training demanded. But they also created an environment where personal characteristics became magnified through constant proximity and shared stress. James Bradford claimed the bed nearest the window with the natural assumption of someone accustomed to having first choice in any situation. His unpacking process revealed an impressive collection of military manuals, tactical gear, and photographs that documented a family history of distinguished service spanning 3 generations. He spoke confidently about expectations and strategies for succeeding in training, his voice carrying the kind of assured optimism that came from never having encountered a challenge he couldn't overcome through determination and natural ability. William Torres methodically arranged his belongings with the precision of someone whose life had been organized around discipline and continuous improvement for many years. His section of the room became a shrine to martial arts excellence, displaying belts, trophies, and certificates that documented achievements in multiple fighting disciplines. He spent his first evening demonstrating complex kata sequences that showcased both his technical mastery and his dedication to traditional training methods. David Park's area reflected the minimalist efficiency of someone who understood that success came through focused preparation rather than accumulation of material possessions. His few belongings were high-quality items chosen for functionality rather than appearance, and his evening routine of stretching and light exercise demonstrated the kind of body awareness that characterized elite athletes who understood the importance of consistent maintenance and injury prevention. Marcus quietly claimed the remaining bed and arranged his modest possessions with the same careful attention to order and cleanliness that had characterized his life under Master Lu's guidance. His belongings revealed little about his background or capabilities, consisting mainly of books on philosophy and strategy, simple training clothes, and a few personal items that carried emotional rather than practical significance. His roommates paid little attention to Marcus during their first evening together, their conversations naturally gravitating toward topics that highlighted their own impressive achievements and ambitious expectations for their performance in upcoming training exercises. Marcus listened thoughtfully to their discussions, learning about their backgrounds and motivations while revealing almost nothing about his own preparation or philosophy regarding the challenges they would face. The first week of Royal Guard, training focused on basic assessment and orientation, designed to establish baseline capabilities while introducing recruits to the Academy's culture and expectations. Physical fitness evaluations tested strength, endurance, speed, and agility, using standardized measures that had been refined through decades of experience. Academic assessments measured analytical thinking, tactical reasoning, and knowledge of history, law, and current affairs relevant to Royal Guard responsibilities. Marcus performed competently, but not spectacularly, on most standardized evaluations, earning scores that placed him solidly in the middle range of recruit capabilities. Without drawing particular attention from instructors or fellow trainees, his approach to each assessment was characterized by efficient effort rather than dramatic displays of superiority. methodical problem-solving rather than intuitive brilliance, and steady consistency rather than peak performance moments that might have marked him as exceptional. This measured performance was entirely deliberate. Reflecting Master Lu's teachings about the tactical advantages of being underestimated by potential opponents or competitors, Marcus understood that revealing his true capabilities prematurely could create expectations and a tension that might interfere with his learning process, or make him a target for those who felt threatened by unexpected excellence from an unlikely source. The combat training assessments were where the differences between recruits became most apparent to both instructors and fellow trainees. Bradford's natural athleticism and leadership experience made him excel in team-based exercises that required coordination and strategic planning. Torres dominated individual sparring sessions with technical precision that came from years of tournament competition and formal martial arts training. Park's explosive speed and endurance gave him significant advantages in timed combat scenarios and extended physical challenges that tested both skill and stamina under pressure. His athletic background had taught him to push through fatigue and maintain performance quality, even when his body was demanding rest and recovery. Marcus approached the combat assessments with the same careful restraint that characterized all his interactions at the academy. During sparring sessions, he demonstrated adequate defensive skills and reasonable offensive capabilities. Without revealing the depth of his training or the unconventional techniques that Master Lu had spent for years helping him perfect, his performance was sufficient to avoid remedial instruction, but not impressive enough to earn recognition or create expectations of exceptional ability. Marcus deliberately held back techniques that might have dominated opponents, choosing instead to learn about their fighting styles, tactical preferences, and psychological approaches to conflict and competition. This strategy of conscious limitation allowed Marcus to gather invaluable intelligence about his fellow recruits while maintaining the low profile that would serve him well when more serious challenges emerged later in the training process. He observed Bradford's tendency to rely on strength and aggressive pressure, Torres's preference for technical complexity and traditional combinations, and Park's emphasis on speed and athletic conditioning over strategic depth. The instructors began forming initial impressions that would influence their expectations in teaching approaches throughout the remainder of the training program. Sergeant Williams, who oversaw hand-to-hand combat instruction, noted Bradford's natural leadership potential and Torres's impressive technical foundation. Sergeant Martinez, responsible for tactical training, was impressed by Park's athletic capabilities and competitive drive. Marcus earned polite but unremarkable evaluations that described him as adequate, steady, and consistent, without suggesting any particular promise or concern. The instructors appreciated his respectful attitude and willingness to learn, but saw nothing that distinguished him from dozens of other competent but unremarkable recruits they had trained over the years. What the instructors couldn't see was Marcus's systematic analysis of their teaching methods, training philosophies, and assessment criteria. He studied their techniques with the same focused attention that Master Lu had taught him to apply to understanding any system or environment he entered. Marcus was learning not just the specific skills being taught, but the underlying principles and assumptions that governed Royal Guard training methodology. His roommates developed similar perceptions, viewing Marcus as a pleasant but unremarkable presence, who contributed positively to their shared living situation without competing for attention or recognition that they preferred to claim for themselves. They included him in conversations and activities with casual friendliness, but didn't consider him a serious rival for the limited positions that would be available at the conclusion of their training. This comfortable anonymity suited Marcus perfectly, allowing him to focus entirely on learning and preparation without the social pressures and competitive dynamics that were affecting relationships between the more prominent recruits. He could observe the evolving group dynamics, study individual personalities under stress, and continue developing his understanding of how Royal Guard culture actually functioned beyond official descriptions and public representations. The Academy's demanding schedule left little time for personal reflection or private training, but Marcus found ways to maintain his connection to Master Liu's teachings through brief meditation sessions and subtle practice of breathing techniques that enhanced his focus and physical readiness. These practices were so understated that his roommates never noticed them, assuming that Marcus was simply someone who preferred quiet contemplation to the social activities that occupied most evening hours. As the first month of training progressed, clear patterns emerged among the recruits that reflected their different approaches to challenge and competition. Bradford consistently scored highest on leadership exercises and team coordination challenges, earning recognition from instructors and respect from fellow recruits. Torres dominated technical skill assessments, particularly those involving weapons training and formal martial arts applications. Park excelled in anything requiring speed, agility, or extended physical performance, setting records in several fitness categories that had stood for years. His athletic achievements were creating expectations that he would continue to distinguish himself as training became more specialized and demanding. Marcus maintained his position in the comfortable middle range of recruit performance, earning passing grades without distinction, while carefully avoiding the kind of dramatic failure that would have drawn unwanted attention from instructors or created doubt about his fundamental suitability for Royal Guard service. His consistent competence was precisely calculated to keep him in the program. Without raising expectations he wasn't yet ready to meet. But beneath this deliberately modest exterior, Marcus was absorbing everything with the kind of comprehensive attention that Master Liu had taught him to bring to any learning opportunity. He was studying not just the technical aspects of Royal Guard training, but the cultural assumptions, strategic priorities, and philosophical foundations that shaped how the organization understood excellence and evaluated potential. The stage was being set for revelations that would challenge everyone's assumptions about capability, potential, and the relationship between appearance and reality. Marcus was positioning himself perfectly for the moment when his true abilities would need to be revealed, when the careful preparation and patient observation would transform into decisive action that would surprise everyone who had dismissed him as merely adequate. The ancient stones of the academy had seen many recruits who looked promising initially, but failed when truly tested, and many others who seemed unremarkable at first, but proved to possess exceptional capabilities when circumstances demanded their best efforts. Marcus was preparing to demonstrate that sometimes the most devastating surprises came from the most unlikely sources. When careful preparation met unexpected opportunity, 6 weeks into their training, the Royal Guard Academy buzzed with anticipation for the quarterly demonstration that brought together instructors, advanced trainees, and distinguished visitors to observe the progress of new recruits. This event served multiple purposes: showcasing the Academy's training methods to important stakeholders, providing recruits with experience performing under observation and pressure, and allowing instructors to identify exceptional talent that might warrant accelerated advancement or specialized training opportunities. The demonstration traditionally culminated in sparring matches that pitted recruits against each other in carefully supervised combat scenarios designed to test not only their technical skills, but also their mental composure, tactical adaptability, and ability to perform effectively when stakes were elevated beyond normal training exercises. These matches were taken seriously by everyone involved, as they often influenced future assignments and career trajectories within the Royal Guard. Hierarchy. Among the distinguished visitors scheduled to attend this particular demonstration was Master Sergeant Alina Kozlov, a legendary figure whose reputation for combat excellence had been earned through 15 years of operational service in the most demanding and dangerous assignments available to Royal Guard members. Her presence at Academy demonstrations was rare and significant, usually indicating that High Command was actively searching for recruits who might possess the exceptional capabilities required for specialized units. Kozlov's personal background included advanced training in 7 different martial arts disciplines, operational experience in counterterrorism and protective services, and a teaching record that had produced some of the Royal Guard's most distinguished current members. She held a 6th-degree black belt in traditional karate, advanced rankings in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu and Krav Maga, and certifications in weapon systems, that most guards never encountered during their entire careers. Her reputation was built not just on technical mastery, but on legendary composure under pressure and an almost supernatural ability to end dangerous confrontations quickly and decisively. Stories of her operational achievements had become part of Royal Guard folklore, inspiring new recruits while establishing a standard of excellence that seemed almost impossible to achieve for those who hadn't witnessed her capabilities personally. The sparring demonstration was structured as a tournament-style elimination bracket that would determine which recruit had developed the most comprehensive combat capabilities during their initial training period. The matches were conducted according to strict safety protocols that allowed full contact combat while minimizing risk of serious injury. Using protective equipment and referee oversight that ensured fair competition, Bradford drew first round matches against opponents whose capabilities were well matched to his own, allowing him to demonstrate the leadership qualities and strategic thinking that had made him stand out since arriving at the academy. His victories were decisive, but not overwhelming, showcasing exactly the kind of controlled competence that instructors appreciated. And that marked him as officer material. Torres faced more technically skilled opponents in matches that became showcases for the advanced martial arts training he had brought to the academy. His victories demonstrated superior technique and tactical sophistication, earning appreciative comments from instructors who recognized the years of disciplined practice that had produced such polished performance under pressure. Park's matches highlighted his exceptional speed and athletic conditioning, allowing him to overwhelm opponents through combinations of explosive movement and superior endurance that left little doubt about his physical capabilities. His fighting style was dynamic and energetic, creating exciting matches that impressed observers while establishing his reputation as one of the most naturally gifted fighters in the class. Marcus drew first-round opponents who were expected to provide moderate challenges without requiring him to reveal capabilities beyond those he had displayed during regular training sessions. His approach to these early matches was characterized by the same careful restraint that had marked all his academy performance, demonstrating sufficient skill to advance while avoiding the kind of dominant performance that would have drawn unwanted attention. He defeated his opponents through patient tactical thinking rather than overwhelming physical superiority, using precise timing and efficient movement to create opportunities for decisive action without relying on flashy techniques or aggressive intimidation. His victories were clean and professional, earning respectful acknowledgement without generating excitement or particular interest from observers. As the tournament progressed through elimination rounds, the anticipated finalists emerged exactly as most observers had predicted based on 6 weeks of training, observation, and assessment. Bradford, Torres, and Park advanced to the semifinal round with victories that confirmed their status as the most capable and promising recruits in there. Class. Marcus also advanced to the semifinals, but his progression was viewed as somewhat fortunate rather than particularly impressive. His opponents had been decent, but not exceptional, and his victories had been competent without being inspiring. Most observers expected him to be eliminated in the next round, when he faced more serious competition from one of the clearly superior fighters. The semi-final matches were scheduled to take place in the Academy's main training hall, with seating arranged to accommodate the distinguished visitors and Academy staff who would observe and evaluate recruit performance. The atmosphere was formal and intense, with an understanding that these matches would significantly influence future opportunities and assignments for all participants. Master Sergeant Kozlov took her seat in the observer section with the kind of focused attention that suggested she was actively evaluating recruits for potential selection for advanced training or special assignments. Her presence elevated the stakes for everyone involved, as the opportunity to impress someone of her stature could accelerate career advancement in ways that normal training progression couldn't match. The first semi-final match pitted Bradford against Torres in what many observers considered the real championship bout, featuring the two recruits who had most consistently demonstrated superior capabilities throughout their training. The match was tactical and technical, showcasing both fighters' strengths while revealing their different approaches to combat and strategic thinking. Bradford's victory came through superior conditioning and strategic patience that allowed him to exploit Ward's tendency toward complex combinations that occasionally left brief openings for simpler, more direct attacks. The match was close, enough to be respectful to both fighters, while clearly establishing Bradford as the favorite for the eventual championship. The second semifinal was expected to be a much shorter affair, with Marcus facing Park in what most observers anticipated would be a demonstration of the difference between adequate competence and genuine athletic excellence. Park's speed and conditioning advantages seemed overwhelming when compared to Marcus's modest physical presence and unremarkable performance record. Marcus stepped onto the training mat with the same calm demeanor that had characterized all his academy interactions, showing no signs of nervousness or intimidation despite facing an opponent whose capabilities had impressed everyone throughout their training. He bowed respectfully to Park according to traditional etiquette, then assumed a fighting stance that was deceptively simple and appeared almost casual to observers unfamiliar with advanced martial arts principles. Park immediately attempted to establish dominance through aggressive movement and explosive combinations that had proven effective against previous opponents. His approach was sound tactically and had been successful throughout the tournament, relying on speed and athletic superiority to overwhelm opponents before they could implement defensive strategies or counterattacks. But something unexpected happened that caught everyone's attention, including Master Sergeant Kozlov, who found herself leaning forward in her seat with sudden interest. Marcus didn't retreat from Park's aggressive assault or attempt to match his explosive energy. Instead, he seemed to flow around Park's attacks like water moving around stones. It's never quite where Park expected him to be when strikes arrived at their intended targets. The movement was so subtle and efficient that many observers initially thought Park was simply missing his attacks due to nerves or poor timing rather than recognizing that Marcus was demonstrating defensive capabilities that went far beyond anything he had shown during previous training exercises. His evasive techniques were precise enough to avoid damage while positioning him perfectly for counterattacks that never came, leaving Park increasingly frustrated and off balance. What followed in the next 2 minutes would become legendary in Royal Guard Academy history, though its significance wouldn't be fully understood until after the demonstration concluded. Marcus began to display combat abilities that seemed to emerge from nowhere. Techniques and principles that bore no resemblance to standard military training or conventional martial arts instruction. His movements became increasingly fluid and precise, each action serving multiple purposes simultaneously while requiring minimal energy expenditure. He demonstrated timing that seemed almost supernatural, finding openings in Park's defenses that shouldn't have existed according to conventional fighting wisdom. Most remarkably, he achieved these results without apparent effort or strain, moving with the kind of relaxed focus that suggested enormous reserves of capability being held carefully in check. Master Sergeant Kozlov's expression shifted from polite interest to intense focus as she recognized techniques and principles that she had encountered only once before. During advanced training with masters whose capabilities existed at the very highest levels of martial arts achievement, she began to understand that Marcus's previous performance had been deliberately modest, concealing abilities that placed him in an entirely different category than his apparent competence had suggested. The match reached its climax when Park, frustrated by his inability to land effective strikes against an opponent who seemed to anticipate his every move, committed to an all-out assault that sacrificed defensive positioning for maximum offensive power. It was exactly the kind of aggressive escalation that Marcus had been patiently waiting for. The moment when his opponent's commitment to attack would create the opening for decisive counteraction. What happened next occurred so quickly that many observers missed the crucial details, seeing only the sudden conclusion without understanding the technical mastery that had made it possible. Marcus stepped slightly to one side with timing so precise it seemed choreographed, redirected Park's momentum using principles of leverage and energy transfer that amplified rather than opposed his opponent's force, and applied a submission technique that rendered Park unconscious in a matter of seconds. The technique was executed with such clinical precision and obvious control that Park suffered no injury beyond temporary unconsciousness. But the demonstration of capability was unmistakable to anyone who understood advanced martial arts applications. Marcus had taken one of the Academy's most athletically gifted recruits and neutralized him completely using methods that appeared almost effortless to execute. The training hall fell silent as observers processed what they had witnessed, trying to reconcile Marcus's previous modest performance with the extraordinary display of capability they had just seen. Master Sergeant Kozlov's expression revealed a mixture of professional appreciation and personal surprise that suggested she was revising her entire assessment of what had appeared to be a thoroughly unremarkable recruit. As Park regained consciousness, and Marcus helped him to his feet with genuine concern and respect, the implications of what had just occurred began to ripple through the academy's carefully structured hierarchy of expectations and assumptions. The final match would now pit Bradford against an opponent whose true capabilities remained largely unknown despite 6 weeks of shared training and constant observation. The 20-minute break between semifinal and championship matches created an atmosphere of electric anticipation that crackled through the Academy's main training hall like static before a thunderstorm. Conversations buzzed with speculation about Marcus's unexpected demonstration of capability. Observers tried to reconcile 6 weeks of modest performance with the technical mastery they had just witnessed during his dismantling of Park's aggressive assault. Master Sergeant Kozlov used the intermission to approach Colonel Hartwell with questions that reflected her growing suspicion that Marcus represented something far more significant than a lucky recruit who had managed one impressive performance. Her trained eye had recognized techniques and principles that suggested years of advanced training under masters whose capabilities existed at the very highest levels of martial arts. Achievement. The conversation between these two legendary figures was conducted in hushed tones that conveyed both professional intrigue and personal curiosity about Marcus's background and preparation. Kozlov described specific details of his defensive movement and counterattack, timing that indicated familiarity with classical martial arts principles that were rarely encountered outside of traditional Asian training environments. Colonel Hartwell acknowledged that Marcus's application materials had been deliberately vague about his martial arts background, listing only personal study and independent training, without providing the kind of detailed credentials and instructor references that characterized most recruits' preparation. At the time, this had seemed like evidence of modest capabilities rather than deliberate concealment of exceptional training. Meanwhile, Marcus sat quietly in his designated rest area, using breathing techniques and mental preparation methods that Master Liu had taught him for managing pressure and maintaining clarity during high-stakes situations. He knew that his performance against Park had revealed more of his capabilities than he had intended, but the circumstances had required decisive action that couldn't be achieved through continued restraint. Bradford approached Marcus during the break with a mixture of respect and wariness that hadn't characterized their previous interactions. The natural leader had recognized that his assumptions about Marcus's capabilities had been fundamentally incorrect, and he was attempting to reassess his opponent while maintaining the confident demeanor that had served him well throughout the training process. Their brief conversation revealed Bradford's tactical intelligence and his ability to adapt his approach when new information became available. He asked thoughtful questions about Marcus's training background and fighting philosophy, probing for insights that might help him prepare for their upcoming match while showing genuine appreciation for the skill that Marcus had displayed. Marcus responded with characteristic humility and respect, acknowledging Bradford's impressive performance. Throughout their training, while avoiding any detailed discussion of his own preparation or capabilities, he maintained the same modest demeanor that had characterized all his academy interactions. Even though the context had shifted dramatically following his demonstration against Park, what Marcus didn't reveal was the strategic analysis he had been conducting throughout 6 weeks of careful observation, studying Bradford's fighting style, tactical preferences, and psychological approaches to competition and conflict. He had identified patterns and tendencies that could be exploited by someone with sufficient skill and proper preparation. But he also recognized Bradford's genuine capabilities and the respect they deserved. As the championship match was announced, the atmosphere in the training hall reached peak intensity. This would be more than a contest between two recruits, It had become a test of different philosophies regarding martial arts training, leadership, development, and the relationship between visible capability and hidden potential. Bradford entered the match area with the confidence of someone who had never lost a significant competition. His physical presence and natural athleticism creating an immediate impression of dominance that influenced observer expectations. He moved with fluid grace that spoke of years of training and natural talent, and his fighting stance advertised both technical competence and aggressive intent. Marcus approached the center of the mat with the same calm demeanor that had characterized all his academy performance, showing no signs of intimidation or hesitation despite facing an opponent whose capabilities had been proven through consistent excellence. His fighting stance was deceptively simple, appearing almost casual to observers who didn't recognize the sophisticated principles underlying his positioning and preparation. The initial exchange of techniques lasted only seconds, but revealed fundamental differences in their approaches to combat and strategic thinking. Bradford attempted to establish control through aggressive pressure and superior physical strength, using combinations that had proven effective against every previous opponent he had faced during training. Marcus responded with defensive techniques that seemed to violate conventional wisdom about how smaller fighters should handle larger, stronger opponents. Instead of retreating or attempting to match Bradford's aggressive energy, Marcus moved with flowing precision that turned Bradford's strength into a liability rather than an advantage. What followed demonstrated principles of martial arts mastery that most observers had never seen applied at such a high level of sophistication and effectiveness. Marcus began to control the rhythm and distance of their engagement through subtle adjustments in position and timing that appeared minimal but had profound effects on Bradford's ability to implement his preferred fighting strategies. Each of Bradford's attacks was met with responses that seemed to require no effort while producing maximum disruption to his balance and tactical positioning. Marcus demonstrated the kind of efficiency that Master Liu had spent for years helping him develop, using precise technique and perfect timing to achieve results that would have required overwhelming physical superiority through conventional methods. The turning point came when Bradford, frustrated by his inability to land effective strikes against an opponent who seemed to anticipate his every move, committed to a powerful combination that sacrificed defensive positioning for maximum offensive impact. It was exactly the kind of strategic opening that Marcus had been patiently creating through 60 seconds of careful positioning and psychological pressure. Master Sergeant Kozlov found herself holding her breath as she recognized the setup that Marcus had been developing throughout the match. Understanding that Bradford's aggressive commitment had created the opportunity for a counterattack that could end the match decisively. She had seen similar patterns in her own advanced training, but never executed with such clinical precision by someone who appeared to be a novice. What happened next would be analyzed and discussed by Royal Guard instructors for years afterward, becoming a teaching example of how advanced martial arts principles could be applied with devastating effectiveness when properly understood and skillfully executed. Marcus's response to Bradford's committed attack was a masterpiece of timing, leverage, and tactical intelligence that demonstrated capabilities far beyond anything suggested by his previous performance. The technique Marcus applied was so advanced and executed with such perfect precision that it rendered Bradford completely helpless in less than 3 seconds. Using his own momentum and strength to create a submission position that was both inescapable and entirely controlled, Bradford found himself immobilized and unable to continue fighting before he fully understood what had happened to neutralize his considerable advantages. But the most remarkable aspect of Marcus's performance was not the technical excellence of his victory, but the obvious restraint and control he demonstrated throughout the process. At any point during the final sequence, he could have caused serious injury to Bradford. But his application of force was precisely calibrated to achieve complete control without unnecessary harm. The demonstration concluded with Bradford tapping out in acknowledgement of defeat, his expression revealing a mixture of shock, respect, and curiosity about capabilities he had never suspected existed beneath Marcus's modest exterior. The training hall remained silent for several seconds as observers processed the implications of what they had witnessed. Master Sergeant Kozlov stood slowly, her movement drawing attention from everyone present as they recognized that her response would provide important context for understanding what had just occurred. Her expression was serious but not disapproving, suggesting professional appreciation rather than concern about unexpected developments in recruit assessment. When she spoke, her words carried the weight of 15 years of operational experience, an advanced training that qualified her to recognize exceptional capability when she encountered it. She requested permission to conduct a brief additional assessment with Marcus, explaining that his demonstration had revealed techniques and principles that warranted further evaluation by someone with appropriate expertise. What followed was an impromptu demonstration that would become legendary throughout the Royal Guard Academy. As Kozlov herself stepped onto the training mat to personally test Marcus's capabilities against someone with genuine mastery and extensive operational experience, the training hall fell into absolute silence as everyone present understood the unprecedented nature of what was about to occur. Master Sergeant Kozlov never sparred with recruits during demonstrations, and her decision to personally assess Marcus's abilities suggested that she had recognized something extraordinary that warranted immediate and direct evaluation. Kozlov moved with the fluid confidence of someone whose capabilities had been proven in life-and-death situations, where technique and timing meant the difference between mission success and catastrophic failure. Her fighting stance was deceptively relaxed, advertising competence without revealing the full depth of abilities that had made her legendary among Royal Guard members who had witnessed her. Operational performance? Marcus bowed respectfully, understanding that he was facing an opponent whose capabilities far exceeded anything he had encountered. During his training with Master Liu or his academy assessment matches, this would be the first true test of whether, for years of intensive but theoretical training, had prepared him for application against someone with both exceptional skill and extensive real-world combat experience. The initial exchange lasted only seconds, but revealed to Kozlov that Marcus possessed technical knowledge and application capabilities that placed him in an entirely different category than any recruit she had previously encountered at the academy. His defensive responses demonstrated mastery of principles that were typically known only to martial artists with decades of dedicated study under acknowledged masters. More significantly, Marcus showed no signs of being intimidated or overwhelmed by facing an opponent whose reputation and obvious capabilities should have been psychologically devastating to someone with limited combat experience. His composure and tactical decision-making remained perfectly controlled, suggesting mental preparation and confidence that could only come from extensive training under extraordinary circumstances. Kozlov escalated her testing progressively, applying techniques and combinations that would have overwhelmed any normal recruit. While carefully evaluating Marcus's responses and adaptive capabilities, she found herself facing an opponent who seemed to understand her intentions before she fully implemented them, whose defensive positioning was always precisely correct, and whose counterattacks were timed with mechanical perfection. The demonstration reached its climax when Kozlov attempted a combination that had never been successfully defended by anyone during her 15 years of operational service, sequence of attacks that had ended confrontations with terrorist operatives and accomplished enemy agents who possessed their own advanced training and combat experience. Marcus's response demonstrated capabilities that stunned even Kozlov, who thought she had seen every possible application of advanced martial arts principles during her extensive career. He not only defended against her combination successfully, but created a counterattack opportunity that forced her into a defensive position for the first time since the demonstration had begun. What happened next would be remembered as one of the most extraordinary moments in Royal Guard Academy history. Kozlov found herself caught in a submission, technique applied with such perfect control and timing that she had no choice but to acknowledge defeat by tapping out, ending the demonstration with Marcus as the clear victor against the most accomplished fighter anyone present had ever seen in action. The silence that followed was deafening, as observers struggled to process the implications of what they had witnessed. A recruit who had been dismissed as adequate had just defeated Master Sergeant Kozlov, whose combat record was legendary and whose capabilities had been proven in the most demanding circumstances imaginable. Marcus immediately released the submission and helped Kozlov to her feet with obvious respect and concern for her welfare, demonstrating the same restraint and control that had characterized his victory against Bradford. His expression showed no arrogance or celebration, only the quiet satisfaction of someone who had successfully applied years of dedicated training when circumstances demanded his best effort. Kozlov's response surprised everyone present, including Marcus himself. Instead of embarrassment or frustration at being defeated by a recruit, she showed obvious excitement and professional admiration for capabilities that exceeded her own. She announced to the assembled observers that Marcus possessed skills that warranted immediate advancement to specialized training programs typically reserved for the most exceptional Royal Guard members. The demonstration concluded with a complete transformation in how Marcus was perceived by instructors, fellow recruits, and distinguished visitors who had witnessed his progression from apparent mediocrity to demonstrated mastery. But the most significant change was in Marcus himself, who finally understood that Master Lu's unconventional training methods had prepared him not just for success, but for excellence at the very highest levels of Royal Guard service. The aftermath of Marcus's stunning demonstration created ripple effects throughout the Royal Guard Academy that extended far beyond the immediate shock of witnessing a recruit defeat Master Sergeant Kozlov in fair combat. Colonel Hartwell found herself conducting an emergency review of assessment protocols and admission procedures, trying to understand how someone with such extraordinary capabilities had been overlooked for 6 weeks of intensive evaluation and training. The colonel's investigation into Marcus's background revealed a deliberately minimal application that had provided only basic biographical information without detailed discussion of his martial arts training or preparation methods. What had initially appeared to be modesty or lack of impressive credentials now seemed like careful concealment of abilities that placed him among the most capable individuals ever to enter Royal Guard training. Marcus was summoned to Colonel Hartwell's office for a private interview that would determine whether his exceptional performance represented genuine mastery or simply fortunate timing against opponents who had underestimated his capabilities. The colonel was determined to understand the full scope of his training and preparation, partly to ensure proper placement within the Academy's specialized programs, and partly to prevent similar oversights in future recruit evaluations. The interview revealed Master Lu's extraordinary background and the unconventional training methods that had produced Marcus's remarkable capabilities. Master Lu had been a legendary figure in traditional martial arts circles before retiring from public teaching to focus on developing a small number of exceptional students according to classical principles that emphasized spiritual development. Alongside physical mastery, Marcus explained the philosophical foundations of his training, describing 4 years of intensive study that had focused on understanding fundamental principles of movement, energy, and tactical thinking rather than memorizing specific techniques or competing in tournaments that would have provided visible credentials. His education had been comprehensive, but private, designed to produce genuine mastery rather than public recognition or competitive achievements. Colonel Hartwell's questions revealed her own extensive knowledge of advanced martial arts principles and her ability to recognize authentic mastery when she encountered it. Her assessment of Marcus's responses confirmed that his demonstration against Kozlov had been representative of consistent capability rather than exceptional performance under unique circumstances. The colonel made a decision that would accelerate Marcus's progression through Royal Guard training by several months, recommending him for immediate advancement to specialized programs, typically reserved for the most promising candidates after successful completion of basic training. This recommendation was unprecedented for a recruit who had been at the academy for only 6 weeks. But Marcus's demonstrated capabilities clearly warranted exceptional treatment. More significantly, Colonel Hartwell requested permission from High Command to have Marcus evaluated for potential assignment to the most elite units within the Royal Guard, specialized teams whose existence was known only to senior leadership and whose missions required capabilities that existed at the absolute pinnacle of human performance. Such evaluations were typically conducted only after years of distinguished service and proven excellence in standard Royal Guard operations. Meanwhile, Marcus's fellow recruits struggled to process the complete transformation in their understanding of someone they had shared living quarters with for 6 weeks without recognizing his true capabilities. Bradford, in particular, found himself questioning his own assessment abilities and wondering what other assumptions about people and situations might be fundamentally incorrect. The social dynamics within their dormitory room shifted dramatically, as Torres, Park, and Bradford began to view Marcus with a mixture of respect, curiosity, and slight intimidation that reflected their new understanding of his abilities. They asked questions about his training methods and philosophical approach to martial arts, seeking insights that might improve their own performance and understanding. Marcus responded to their interests with the same humble demeanor that had characterized all his interactions at the academy, sharing general principles and training concepts without revealing specific techniques or tactical approaches that might compromise the advantages his unconventional preparation had provided. He emphasized the importance of consistent practice, patient development, and understanding fundamental principles rather than focusing on flashy applications or competitive victories. His roommates began to appreciate qualities in Marcus that they had previously overlooked or dismissed as unremarkable. They noticed his extraordinary observational skills, his ability to analyze complex situations and identify optimal solutions, and his consistent emotional equilibrium that remained stable regardless of external pressures or changing circumstances. Word of Marcus's demonstration spread throughout the academy with the speed that it's characterized any extraordinary event in a closed community where exceptional performance was rare and noteworthy. Instructors who had previously viewed him as a competent but unremarkable recruit began reassessing their teaching approaches and evaluation methods, recognizing that traditional assessment criteria might not adequately identify unconventional excellence. Sergeant Williams, who oversaw hand-to-hand combat instruction, requested permission to conduct additional evaluations with Marcus to understand how his techniques and principles might be integrated into standard Royal Guard training curricula. The demonstration had revealed approaches to combat and tactical thinking that could potentially improve instruction methods for all recruits. Sergeant Martinez, responsible for tactical training, was particularly interested in Marcus's decision-making, process, and situational analysis capabilities. Recognizing that his victory over Park had required strategic planning and psychological insight that went far beyond simple technical superiority. These qualities were exactly what advanced Royal Guard operations required most desperately. The Academy's medical staff conducted comprehensive evaluations to ensure that Marcus's extraordinary performance hadn't been achieved through methods that might compromise his long-term health or sustainability. They found physiological markers that suggested years of disciplined training and conditioning, but no evidence of enhancement methods or techniques that might create future problems. Dr. Rebecca Foster, the Academy's sports medicine specialist, was particularly impressed by Marcus's movement efficiency and injury prevention awareness, noting that his techniques demonstrated understanding of biomechanical principles that typically took years of study to master. His body showed the kind of balanced development that characterized martial artists, who had trained under masters who understood the relationship between physical capability and long-term health. Master Sergeant Kozlov requested a private meeting with Marcus to discuss his training background and future potential within the Royal Guard hierarchy. Her personal defeat by a recruit had been professionally embarrassing, but also intellectually fascinating, presenting an opportunity to learn from someone whose capabilities exceeded her own in specific areas. Their conversation revealed the depth of respect that existed between practitioners who recognized genuine mastery in each other, regardless of age, experience, or institutional hierarchy. Kozlov acknowledged that Marcus's techniques had exposed limitations in her own training and preparation, while Marcus expressed gratitude for the opportunity to test his abilities against someone whose operational experience provided insights that couldn't be gained through training alone. The meeting concluded with Kozlov's formal recommendation that Marcus be evaluated for assignment to Task Force Alpha, the Royal Guard's most classified and demanding unit, whose missions required capabilities that existed at the absolute limits of human potential. Such recommendations were typically made only for guards who had distinguished themselves through years of exceptional service in standard operations. As news of this recommendation spread through Academy leadership, Marcus found himself at the center of discussions that would determine not just his immediate training trajectory, but his entire career path within the Royal Guard organization. The modest recruit, who had been overlooked for 6 weeks, was suddenly being considered for opportunities that most guards never encountered during their entire careers. The transformation was so dramatic and rapid that Marcus sometimes wondered if he were experiencing an elaborate dream rather than reality. Master Lu's teachings about remaining centered regardless of external recognition or changing circumstances helped him maintain emotional equilibrium while adapting to expectations and opportunities that far exceeded anything he had imagined when applying to the Academy. The stage was set for revelations that would challenge fundamental assumptions about capability, potential, and the relationship between conventional training methods and exceptional results. Marcus was preparing to demonstrate that sometimes the most profound mastery emerged from sources that traditional institutions never thought to recognize or value until extraordinary circumstances forced them to reconsider their assumptions about excellence and achievement. 2 months after the demonstration that had transformed his entire trajectory within the Royal Guard Academy, Marcus found himself standing in the briefing room of Task Force Alpha, surrounded by operatives whose legendary capabilities had been proven through missions that remained classified at the highest levels of government security. The transition from overlooked recruit to elite operative had occurred with a speed that still seemed surreal. But the challenges ahead would test whether his exceptional performance could be sustained under real operational conditions. Commander Victoria Cross, who led Task Force Alpha with a combination of tactical brilliance and operational experience that had made her unit the most effective in Royal Guard history, conducted Marcus's final evaluation personally. Her 30 years of distinguished service included operations that had prevented international incidents, protected heads of state from assassination attempts, and neutralized terrorist threats that could have claimed hundreds of lives. The evaluation took place in a specially designed facility that could simulate the most demanding scenarios Task Force Alpha operatives might encounter during actual missions. Marcus faced challenges that tested not only his combat capabilities but also his decision-making under extreme pressure, his ability to protect civilians while neutralizing threats, and his capacity for operating independently when communication with command became impossible. Each scenario was designed to push operatives beyond their normal capabilities while evaluating their performance under conditions that replicated the chaos, uncertainty, and split-second timing that characterized real operations. Marcus approached these challenges with the same calm focus that had served him throughout his academy training, but the stakes and complexity were exponentially higher than anything he had previously encountered. The first scenario placed Marcus in a simulated terrorist hostage situation where he needed to neutralize 4 armed operatives while ensuring the safety of 6 civilians in a confined space with limited visibility and multiple entry points. The exercise required perfect coordination of combat techniques, tactical planning, and situational awareness that left no room for error or hesitation. Marcus's performance exceeded even Commander Cross's optimistic expectations, as he demonstrated the ability to process complex tactical information instantaneously, while maintaining awareness of civilian positions and threat assessments simultaneously. His movement through the scenario was fluid and precise, each action serving multiple purposes, while advancing toward the objective with relentless efficiency. The simulation concluded with all hostiles neutralized and all civilians protected, achieved through a sequence of actions that took less than 90 seconds but required capabilities that typically took years of operational experience to develop. Commander Cross's evaluation noted that Marcus had demonstrated tactical intelligence and combat effectiveness that matched or exceeded that of operatives with extensive field experience. Subsequent scenarios tested Marcus's capabilities under different conditions and operational requirements, including protection detail, simulations, counterintelligence operations, and emergency response situations that required improvisation and adaptability rather than predetermined tactical responses. In each case, Marcus's performance demonstrated consistent excellence that suggested comprehensive preparation for the full range of challenges Task Force Alpha operatives faced. The evaluation process revealed that Marcus's training under Master Liu had prepared him not just for individual combat, Xilians, but for the kind, a multi-dimensional operational thinking that characterized the most effective Royal Guard members. His philosophical understanding of conflict and strategic principles translated directly into practical capabilities that served operational requirements with remarkable effectiveness. Commander Cross's final assessment recommended Marcus for immediate operational assignment with Task Force Alpha, bypassing the usual probationary period in advanced training requirements that typically preceded such prestigious appointments. Her report noted that Marcus possessed rare combination of technical mastery, tactical intelligence, and moral foundation that made him ideally suited for the unit's most demanding missions. The news of Marcus's assignment guards circles with the kind of excited speculation that accompanied any unprecedented development in an organization that valued tradition and established procedures. His progression from overlooked recruit to elite operative in less than 3 months became a case study in the importance of recognizing potential. It might not conform to conventional expectations or traditional pathways to excellence. Master Liu received a formal letter of appreciation from Royal Guard High Command, acknowledging his role in developing capabilities that now served the kingdom's security interests at the highest level. The recognition validated his unconventional training methods while establishing connections between traditional martial arts, mastery, and modern operational requirements. Marcus's former roommates at the academy followed news of his achievements with a mixture of pride and amazement, understanding that they had been witnesses to the early stages of what was clearly becoming an extraordinary career. Bradford, Torres, and Park all continued their own successful progression through Royal Guard training. But they never forgot the lesson Marcus had taught them about the dangers of making assumptions based on first impressions. The story of the quiet recruit who had defeated Master Sergeant Kozlov became part of Royal Guard folklore, inspiring future generations of trainees to look beyond surface appearances when evaluating their own potential and that of their fellow recruits. Marcus's example demonstrated that exceptional capability could emerge from unexpected sources and unconventional preparation methods. 6 months into his operational assignment with Task Force Alpha, Marcus participated in a mission that would cement his reputation as one of the most capable operatives in Royal Guard history. The successful neutralization of an international terrorist cell required exactly the kind of technical mastery, tactical intelligence, and moral courage that he had demonstrated during his academy evaluation. The mission's success prevented a planned attack on civilian targets that could have claimed hundreds of lives, validating Commander Cross's decision to fast-track Marcus's advancement and proving that his exceptional demonstration against Kozlov had been representative of consistent operational capability rather than isolated excellence under artificial training conditions. As Marcus prepared for his next assignment, he reflected on the journey that had brought him from Master Liu's isolated training facility to the heights of Royal Guard service. The lesson he had learned was profound and universal. The genuine excellence often developed in solitude and silence, revealing itself only when circumstances demanded the very best that dedicated preparation could provide. The unassuming young man who had been dismissed by his fellow recruits as merely adequate had become living proof that the most extraordinary capabilities had sometimes resided in the most unlikely packages. His story would continue to inspire those who understood that true mastery was measured not by initial impressions or conventional credentials, but by the ability to perform when performance mattered most. The Royal Guard Academy updated its assessment protocols to ensure that future Marcus Chens would be recognized and properly evaluated from the beginning of their training, acknowledging that the organization's most valuable assets might not always advertise their capabilities through traditional means. The lesson had been learned. Never underestimate the quiet ones, for they might possess depths that could surprise even the most experienced observers. Marcus's legend was just beginning, but already his name was spoken with respect and admiration throughout the Royal Guard. The recruit who had seemed destined for mediocrity had become a reminder that in the world of elite military service, the most devastating surprises often came from the most unexpected sources. When patient preparation met the perfect moment to reveal what dedicated training could achieve,